I found my wife's secret stash of $250, $0, hidden in our house after she suddenly filed for divorce and claimed I gambled it all away, only to discover she used it to bribe the lawyer and steal everything in our name. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, sitting in my living room with my mind racing after discovering something that shattered my entire world. It all started a few weeks ago when my wife, Lisa, suddenly announced she was filing for divorce. No warning, no real explanation, just that she was done and wanted out. She was bitchy, dismissive, and kept throwing around lies about how I'd been gambling away our savings, which was a total lie. The odd thing was, she was acting way too calm, almost guilty, which should have been my first red flag, but I brushed it off as her usual moodiness. At first, I figured maybe she'd had a fling or was seeing someone else, but I didn't have proof. That is, until I started noticing strange things around the house, small things but enough to get me suspicious. Her phone was always locked, and she'd get defensive whenever I asked about it. She'd leave her emails open sometimes, and I'd catch glimpses of strange messages, flirty, suggestive texts from a guy I'd never heard of. Her stories about her whereabouts didn't add up either. She'd say she was working late, but her schedule was suddenly packed with trips and dinners I wasn't invited to. Then one day, I came home early from work and saw her sneaking out of the bedroom with a bag. I asked her what she was doing, and she shot me a cold look, claiming she was just organizing her stuff for her trip. But I knew better. Something was off. I decided to do a little digging. I started checking her emails more carefully, and that's when I found it, an email thread with a lawyer discussing a huge sum of money and how she was going to secure her future. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The email mentioned a stash of cash 250, that she'd hidden in the house, and how she used some of it to bribe her lawyer to help her take everything in our name. I couldn't believe she was that calculated. She lied about everything about us, about her business trips, and now I found out she'd been secretly building a fortune behind my back, using my money, my trust, and her lies to steal everything I worked for. I felt sick. How did I miss all the signs? How could she be so heartless? The woman I loved, the woman I married, was a complete stranger hiding a massive secret. And not just that, she was cheating on me with some guy named who she'd been seeing for months. I found receipts, hotel bookings, and even explicit texts. It was like my entire life was a lie. The worst part, she had the audacity to say she was doing this all for her future, that I'd ruined her life with my supposed gambling and laziness. I was furious. I was hurt. But mostly I was just stunned that she could be so manipulative and cold. All I ever wanted was an honest life with her, and it turns out she'd been planning her escape and her betrayal for months. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, realizing I'd been played for a fool. The woman I loved was out there, lying, cheating, stealing from me, all while pretending to be the perfect wife. I felt this mix of anger and sadness that I can't even fully put into words. It's like my world had just crashed down around me, and I had no idea what to do next. After I found out about the money, everything else started to make sense. The way Lisa acted so distant, her sudden trips, her dismissiveness, every little thing clicked into place. I remember sitting there, feeling a mix of shock and rage, scrolling through those emails and messages. That stash of $250, $0, wasn't just some secret savings. It was her leverage, her escape fund, and she'd used part of it to bribe her lawyer into helping her steal everything we had in our names. That's when I realized this wasn't just a betrayal. It was a full-blown scheme. I felt like I was hit by a freight train. My mind was racing, trying to process how I'd been so blind. I'd always thought Lisa was just stressed or overwhelmed. She'd always been a little bitchy, but I never thought she'd do something this calculated. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all the signs? The late nights, the secret phone calls, the strange expenses. It's like she'd been planning this for months, maybe even longer. And the worst part, I had no idea where the money was hidden or how much she'd already spent or moved around. All I knew was that I'd been played. I decided I had to confront her. I couldn't let her keep lying. I waited until she was home that evening, and I asked her straight out about the emails, about the money, about the trips. Her face twisted into this bitchy sneer, like she was annoyed I was even asking. She tried to deny everything, claiming I was paranoid, that I'd been gambling and losing our savings, but I pulled out the emails and showed her the proof. Her eyes widened for a second, then she snapped back with some bullshit about how I was just jealous of her success, that she'd only been trying to protect herself from my supposed gambling addiction. That's when I saw her lie for what it was: desperate, flimsy, and full of holes. She said she'd been working late, that she'd never cheated on me, and that the money was hers because she'd earned it. But I knew. Better, I knew she'd lied about everything before, and I was starting to see a pattern. The woman I'd married was a manipulative bitch who'd been planning her escape for months, using my trust, my money, and my good name to cover her tracks. I felt sick, angry, and betrayed all at once. It was like I'd been punched in the gut and I couldn't breathe properly. The reality hit me hard. She'd been cheating on me with this guy she'd been seeing secretly, and all along, she'd been secretly building her fortune. I found texts where she was texting him about our future, about how she was going to leave everything behind and start fresh with him. She'd even booked hotels with him, sent explicit photos, and made plans to run away once she had enough money. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was lying to my face about everything, even about her feelings for me. Her whole act was so convincing, but behind it all was a woman who'd been scheming, cheating, and stealing right under my nose. I didn't know what to do at that point. The shock was still sinking in, but I knew I had to act. If she'd already hidden this much money, what else was she capable of? I started thinking about how to get my hands on that stash, how to protect what was left of my life. But I also felt a deep sense of loss of trust, of love, of the life I'd thought I had. I wondered how I'd let her get away with this, how I'd been so blind. I kept asking myself if I could ever forgive her, or if I should just cut my losses and walk away. The betrayal ran so deep, it was like a hole had opened up inside me, and I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to fill it. After that confrontation, I knew I couldn't just sit back and let her walk away with everything. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Lisa's plan was so calculated, so cold. She'd used my trust, my money, and even her own family to cover her tracks. I realized I needed a plan of my own if I wanted to take back some control and get even a piece of what she'd stolen. First, I started digging into her financials, bank accounts, credit cards, anything I could access without her knowing. I knew she'd hidden some of the money in offshore accounts or in some secret accounts under fake names. She was that kind of smart, that manipulative. I had to be careful, though. The last thing I wanted was to tip her off that I was onto her. I didn't want her to move the money again, or worse, destroy evidence. So I kept my investigations quiet, doing everything I could to stay under the radar. Meanwhile, I also reached out to a lawyer I knew, someone who specialized in financial crimes and divorces. I explained the situation, and he confirmed my worst fears. Lisa had been planning this for months, maybe even years. She used some of the money to bribe her lawyer to help her transfer assets, and she'd already started the process of legally stealing everything we owned. It was like she'd been building a new life for herself while I was left in the dark. I couldn't believe how far gone she was. The woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, was now this cold, calculating thief. And I was just the fool who trusted her. I felt humiliated but also determined. If I was going down, I was going down fighting. I decided I'd confront her again, but this time with proof, and I'd do everything I could to stop her from taking everything. I also started thinking about how to protect myself legally, getting a restraining order, freezing her accounts, and making sure she couldn't transfer any more assets. I was furious that she'd been secretly siphoning money out of our joint accounts, using it to bribe her lawyer, and then lying about her trips and her success. It was all a lie, just a way to cover her tracks. I knew I had to act fast before she managed to wipe out what was left of our joint assets. The more I uncovered, the more I realized she'd been lying so much. She probably thought she could get away with it forever. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I was going to fight for what was mine, what was rightfully mine. I started gathering all the evidence I could, screenshots, bank statements, emails, and I planned my next move carefully. I was done being the naive husband. If she thought she could cheat, steal, and lie her way out of this, she was dead wrong. I was going to make sure she paid for every bit of it, one way or another. By the time I had enough evidence to really make a move, I knew I couldn't just confront Lisa directly again. She was too paranoid now, probably expecting me to be onto her. Instead, I decided to set a trap. I carefully coordinated with my lawyer, feeding him information while I kept a low profile. My goal was to catch her red-handed trying to move the remaining funds or do something that would seal her fate legally. I also secretly contacted a private investigator. I needed someone who could follow her, see where she was going, and maybe even find that hidden stash of money she'd been bragging about. It was risky. If she found out I was onto her, she'd just get more cunning, hide everything better, or disappear altogether. But I couldn't just sit and wait for her to run off with what was left. I had to act fast and I had to be smart. Meanwhile, Lisa was starting to show cracks in her facade. She was acting more bitchy than ever, snapping at me over small things, trying to gaslight me when I asked about her whereabouts. She even started accusing me of being paranoid and controlling, which was just her way of deflecting. But I knew her game. I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the desperation, the way she was trying to keep her lies intact. I also noticed she was more secretive with her phone, locking it even when she wasn't aware I was watching. One night, I followed her to a hotel downtown. She met with her side piece, and I watched from a distance as they entered together. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the way she looked at him, the way she touched him, it was all so obvious. She was cheating on me with this guy, and she'd been hiding it for months. That was the final nail in the coffin. I felt my stomach turn, but at the same time, a surge of anger pushed through me. I knew I had to do something about it, for my own sanity and for the betrayal I'd been subjected to. The next morning, I confronted her about the hotel. She tried to deny everything, saying I was just imagining things, that I was paranoid. But I had proof, pictures, hotel receipts, messages. Her face went pale and she started to sputter excuses, saying was just a friend, that she was only seeing him to feel alive again. That was such bullshit. I knew she'd been lying all along. She'd been playing me, cheating, stealing, and now she was trying to spin it like I was the crazy one. That's when I realized the extent of her deception. She'd been so good at lying, so convincing, that I had almost believed her. But I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I was done. I decided I'd gather all the evidence I could and I'd take her to court. I wanted her out. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect, about dignity, about finally standing up to someone who had betrayed me so deeply. I felt my resolve harden. I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine, and I was going to make sure she paid for her lies, her cheating, and her theft. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Lisa had been planning this entire scheme for months. She hidden the $250, $0 in a secret stash behind the false wall in the basement, a place I never thought to check. I remembered how she'd always been bitchy about cleaning out that corner, but I never suspected she was hiding millions in cash there. When I finally found the access point, I was stunned. It was a small, hidden compartment, and inside, neatly stacked bundles of cash, so much money I couldn't believe my eyes. I took pictures, documented everything, and then called my lawyer immediately. That stash was the proof I needed to show the courts how deep her betrayal went. The money wasn't just hers. It was stolen from our joint accounts, from the life we built together. I felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that I finally had concrete evidence, and anger that she'd been so manipulative, so ruthless in her plans to take everything I'd ever worked for. While I was gathering evidence, Lisa was trying to keep her game going. She was increasingly bitchy, snapping at me over small things, accusing me of snooping. On her, she'd say I was paranoid, that I was just jealous of her success, but I knew better. I saw her desperation, how she'd been trying to cover her tracks, destroy evidence, and manipulate everyone around her. She even tried to turn the kids against me, saying I was just trying to ruin her. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I was done being played. I also learned she'd already transferred some of the money out of the country, wiring it to offshore accounts she'd set up long ago. I couldn't believe how far she'd gone. She was so determined to escape with her new life, and to leave me holding the bag. I felt sick thinking about how much she'd lied, cheated, and stolen from me. That night, I decided I had to take action to stop her from running away with everything. I filed for an emergency injunction, froze her bank accounts, and started the legal process to reclaim what she'd stolen. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her movements, making sure she didn't do something stupid like move the rest of the money again. I knew she was planning to leave town soon, probably and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The final blow came when I confronted her with all the evidence. She tried to deny everything, but I laid it all out: the emails, the receipts, the hidden stash. Her bitchy attitude turned into anger and panic. She started screaming, calling me all sorts of names, trying to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. But I stood my ground. I told her she was done, that I'd fight her in court, and that she'd pay for every lie, every cheat, every stolen dollar. I could see the realization in her eyes that I wasn't backing down. That moment, I knew I was finally taking control of my life again, even if it was going to be a long, painful process. I won't lie, this has been the most traumatic experience of my life. But I also learned something crucial. Trust is fragile, and some people will do anything to get what they want. Lisa's betrayal cut deep, but it also made me realize I need to be more careful, more cautious. I'll never fully trust her again, but I will rebuild. I've started to. See that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. And now I'm focused on getting my life back, without her and without her lies. The aftermath has been a whirlwind of court dates, legal battles, and trying to piece my life back together. Lisa was served with the injunction, and her attempts to hide or transfer the remaining money were thwarted just in time. She was furious, throwing tantrums, calling me every name under the sun: bitch, manipulative, greedy, you name it. But honestly, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction knowing I'd finally caught her in her lies and that she wouldn't get away with it. The court eventually ordered her to pay back every penny she stole, plus damages for the emotional distress she caused. Living without her has been a shock, but also a relief. I've had to change locks, cut off her access to our bank accounts, and even start therapy to deal with the betrayal and the heartbreak. It's not easy, I won't pretend it is, but I've learned a lot from this nightmare. Mainly that trust is fragile and some people are just plain selfish and dishonest. I also learned to be more cautious, to listen to my gut, and to never ignore the small signs of trouble. Looking back, I see how Lisa was always bitchy, always lying, and always scheming. I was blinded by love, but now I realize I was just a pawn in her game. She used my trust, my money, and even my emotions to build her new life without me. I feel a mix of anger and sadness about everything she took from me, but I also feel a strange sense of liberation. I've learned to stand up for myself, to recognize red flags earlier, and most importantly, to value honesty and loyalty above all. To anyone out there going through something similar, trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Be vigilant with your money, your emotions, and your relationship. Because some people will do anything to get what they want, and it's better to face the truth early than to be by betrayal later. I'm still healing, still rebuilding, but I know one thing for sure: I will never let someone like Lisa manipulate me again. Her lies and schemes cost her everything: her marriage, her reputation, and her dignity. And in the end, I gained my life back, even if it's a little bruised and battered. That's the real victory.